Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden. If you're watching this, this was a live stream. If you're watching this on YouTube, this was a live stream. So be sure to check the description and also the pinned comment so you can skip ahead to the main content. In the meantime, we're going to be in the waiting room. We're going to get started in 10 or 15 minutes. Wait till everyone gets here, and we'll see you later. Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden. Welcome to a Monday stream where we're going to be reviewing the Discord Weekly Challenge from last week and also the Discord Weekly Discussion from last week. It's good to see all your faces. Welcome in, everyone. Yep, that's what the stream's about. And if you're in the Discord, or if you're not in the Discord, you should be. Go to coding.garden/Discord. It has instructions on how to join the Discord. But once you're in the Discord, make sure you go over to channels and roles on the left-hand side, and you choose to view community channels. If you'd like to join the upcoming community events, which I'll talk about, you can also choose the community role. And then for discussion channels like the weekly discussion and the weekly challenge, you'll want to click this button to join that. But first of all, let's talk about the weekly, or not the weekly, the event that's coming up that you should check out if you're interested in hanging out with the community. So Roga and Ched are both organizing a game night, and it's going to happen 2 days from now on Wednesday. And from the poll, it looks like it's roughly going to be happening around right now, whatever time it is right now in your time zone, maybe like an hour or two before right now. But actually, if you look at this pinned message, or look at this message, it'll show you when the event is in your time zone. But if you'd like to attend, be sure to vote on this poll which time works best for you. And we're going to be playing some games. So right now, Roga and Ched are working out what games we're going to play. But I won't be hosting it. I'll just be there playing games with you all. Either, I think both Roga and Ched are going to be the hosts, getting everything going. So definitely do that if you're interested in hanging out with us. But to talk about the weekly challenge, you can check out the weekly challenge channel. Let me actually just bring this up if I can. Can I? I guess I can't. But last week's weekly challenge was actually a CSS battle. So if you have not heard of CSS battle, it's a website where you're given some challenge that you need to recreate with CSS only. So on the left-hand side, you have your code and your preview, and you need to recreate the right-hand side with CSS only. So this is what we're going to do today. And if you haven't done it yet, feel free to do it and then share your code in the Discord, because quite a few people have already submitted their solutions in the Discord. You'll notice they're using the spoiler tag so that we don't see their code automatically. So we're going to be doing that today. And then next week, we'll be doing this challenge. So if you've already done the CSS challenge, which was last week's challenge, which I'm going to review today, you can get started on next week's challenge. And I gave you 3 options. You can do all 3. You can do one of them, whatever your comfort and skill level is. But they're basically 3 coding challenges of increasing difficulty. So you can pick one of those, do that, and then post your solution in the Discord, and we'll talk about the solutions next week. And then after that, we're going to do the weekly discussion. So last week's topic was mainly about what is production. So the topic of discussion last week was, what does it mean to be in production? What makes code production ready? And then specifically, this last part came from Stefan, or also Sej in the YouTube chat, who said, if you're learning something new, how do you know when you're ready to work in production with the thing you've been learning? And I think the answer to this question is really just understanding what production is and having your own ideas about when something should be in production, which we'll talk about. We posted this discussion topic last week, so quite a few people chimed in. We had Jicom Gaming, Ched, Stefan, Roga, and I'm going to give my input today and also take some of their input as well. Yeah, let's pin that over on. Did I reorder? Did you reorder the channels? Oh, you did. Thanks. I don't know why it wasn't working for me. Appreciate that, Oscar. But yeah, let's. Thank you, Ched. Thanks for pinning that. All right. So yeah, that's last week's. And then if you want to participate in this week's discussion, which will, again, basically we're on a time delay. So I post the stuff in the Discord. Everyone has a chance to try it and discuss it. And then the following week, I'll be reviewing it live on stream and we'll have like a community chat about it. So next week, we're going to be talking about this one. Are you using TypeScript in your JavaScript project? If so, why? If not, why not? What are some benefits you've noticed of using TypeScript? What are some downfalls? If you haven't started using TypeScript, what is stopping you from making the switch? So that's that's the topic of discussion for next week, but feel free to go into the thread here and add your insights or questions. And let's take a quick stretch. We're just getting started. So as you can see, this is definitely like a community focused stream today. I'm going to be solving some coding problems. I'm going to show you community solutions for coding problems. And then we're going to be chatting about a dev topic that we're also going to be getting input from you in the live chat and then also the community in the Discord. So let's get into it. I'm just going to go right here, right into it. We're going to do the weekly challenge, which is a CSS battle. And I will post this link in the chat if you want to give it a try, but I'm going to do my best to complete this CSS battle live. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hide the chat while I'm doing it just so I don't get any spoilers. And if you want to do the CSS battle, you should also mute the stream, hide the stream while I'm working on it, so that way you can share your solution as well. And also, if you're watching this not live, feel free to pause the stream and then come back to watch my solution. But let's get into it. Also, let's see how long it takes me. I'm gonna sort of attempt to speed run it. I guess it's not really a speed run attempt if it's sort of. But let's see how long it takes me to solve this. Here we go. So we need to recreate the right-hand side. We have the left-hand side. And they give you the colors down at the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and make the background color. I think the background color is this color. So you have access to the body as well to target. So I could say body background like that. Yep, so that matches. And what's nice is you can use this to hover over to see what yours looks like versus what it should look like. So you can get like the exact right alignment. I think the other thing I'm going to do is my container that has all the stuff in it, I'm going to center it on the screen in the body. So on the body, I'm going to say display grid and place content center, I think. And then also give it a height of 100 view height. So yeah, that makes the parent container take up the whole thing. And then this is, or should be, I mean, can I do 100%? Is that a little bit more accurate? This should be exactly in the center, though it looks a little bit off center. But we'll see. Okay, so now I'm gonna call this my container div. Basically, this one here is gonna be the container. So I'm gonna give it a class of container. Now I will mention one of the things about CSS Battle is you'll get more points if you use fewer characters. I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm gonna make my solution very readable, so we can keep track of what's going on. We can then try to minify it afterward. Okay, so we have the container. I actually want it to have a width of 100%, and then a background of this light blue color. So I'm gonna grab this blue color. We'll go background like that, and then height. We'll have to figure out what the height is, but let's just do like 30% and see what happens. Nothing. Div class container height 30%. I mean, do we need to give it a specific pixel height? Like 50 pixels? What happens if I do that? Nothing. What am I missing? Div class container width 100%, background height. What did we have before? Maybe the width also needs a static value? Yeah, it doesn't like the width of 100% there. What if I make the parent width 100% as well? And then if I made this 100%? No, it doesn't like the percentage. Is there a viewport? What's going on here? Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll keep this as percentage wise, and then we'll have to statically set the percent. I don't like this. Let's look at the inspector to see what's going on here. I want to be able to use percentage of the container. Okay, the box is 400 by 300. It's actually telling us that, so let's do that. we know that we can do. I'm seeing it now. So the pixel ratings are at the top. So if I do width 400 pixels and then height 300 pixels, now the container, which is inside the body, %, should work. Maybe because it's not the body. Maybe there's another wrapping container. Honestly, that might actually be what it is. Let's just see, so I know that I'm not going crazy. We've got this. Yeah, that's exactly okay. So we do have an iframe, and then it's got body, and then div class container. I'm not gonna futz with it anymore. I'm gonna use the hard coded pixel values, but I don't like it. Look, this body has a width and a height, and then the child element has a width of 100%. When I look at the chat afterward, maybe I'll see what I'm doing wrong, but that really irks me. Regardless, this needs to be 400 pixels wide. Great. Now we need to figure out the exact pixel height, so we'll just play around with this. Let's see if it's 100. It's more than 100. Let's see if it's 200. That's too much. We'll do 175. That's a little too much. 160. A little too much. 150. It's also like not exactly in the right spot. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do place center. I might just have to give it a margin top and move it down exactly what it needs to be. Let's guess that it's like 75 pixels. Yeah, we got that. So it is 150 pixels high and 75 pixels from the top. Okay, we're on our way. Now what I want to do is I want to create a square that's the same color as the background and then put it on top of this container. I guess technically I can put it in the container, like then it can be centered in the container, and then it can just go outside the container. So let's give this a div, give a class of inner, and then inner, for now we're going to make it red so we can see it, but it's going to have a width of 200 pixels and a height of 200 pixels. So we need a square. We need this square to be in the center of the container. So I'm going to make this a flex box. So it's exactly in the center. I guess the one issue is if I want it to be outside of the container, it needs to kind of be positioned on top. So I'm leaning towards putting it on top. So we'll call this the BG container or the background container. And then this other one we'll call the overlay container. And we won't make that a flex box anymore because we're literally just going to position it on top of it. I'm really confused as to why this is now appearing below, because it came after? I don't know. We're going to give this one a position of absolute. I guess we can give it a position of fixed because at this point it's on top of everything. And I guess we're going to have to give it a Z index. And, well, I guess no, never mind. It's actually, it's down here, but we can't see it. So that's why it looks like it's behind, but it's not actually behind. If we give it top 0, yeah, like that. Okay. We're on our way. So we want this to be rotated 45 degrees. So we'll just do that. So we'll just do transform, rotate 45 deg. Great. So the thing is rotated. Now we need to put it in the right spot. And I think the thing is, before we rotate it, if we get it in the exact center of the page in the same way, so if I do top, so if it's, I'm gonna have to figure out the right size of it, but if we do top to put it halfway, so the whole height is 300 pixels, half of that is 150. Our height is 200. 150? Top 50? Yeah, okay, so that puts our little square in the exact center. And then we should be able to do left. So the width is 400 minus 200, so left 200 pixels. 100 pixels, okay. So now it's in the exact center. And then if we transform it, it's not quite big enough. I need it to be even bigger. Now, people are probably yelling in the chat right now. There's probably a better way to do this, like relative, but I tried doing things that were going to be relative, and they're not relative, so I just have to do hard code everything. That's just going to be the way it is. I'm guessing these are 250 or 225 now. I guess I could do a calculation. Yeah, I could do a calc. That is, we have for the top, we have the total height, which is 300. We want to subtract the current height, which is 250 pixels. Did I do pixels? Divided by 250 pixels divided by 2, which would be 125. Right? I don't know, but we'll do the left now. Same thing. So if we know the full width is 400 pixels and we are 250 pixels wide, yeah, divided by, it does need to be divided by 2. I'm really struggling with this. It would be really nice if I could just say be in the center. Honestly, I kind of want it to be in the center. Yeah, all right. I'm taking a step back, and here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna create another container that's the full width and height. So that way I can just easily center the overlay inside of that container. That's my next plan. This is gonna go in here, and then we'll give this the outer overlay container. And that will be the full width of the body. So width 100%, height 100%, and it will be fixed with a top of 0. So that should, this container is now the exact size of the body and then positioned right on top of the body. So if I give this container, make it a flex box, I can center it like that, and then center it like this. Okay, so now I can find the exact size of the thing. And actually, it's too big. We're gonna try 225. That's not it either. We're gonna try 230. That's not it either. Also, it looks like it's oh, I see. It's not centered. I thought it was centered. It's actually hanging over on this side, so I had that wrong. Okay, so it's not centered. Well, I guess I can technically push it to the right. Wait, it is centered. Okay, I'm just not seeing the full screen. Whew. All right. I was not looking at the right thing. Okay, it is fully centered. It looks like it's more to the left than it is to the right. What is going on here? Because this one kind of looks lined up, but then this one is not. All right. Does that mean it needs to be? Oh, is it the transform? Maybe it's my transform. I need like transform origin or something like that. Like transform from the center. That did nothing. Oh, look at this. There's a little margin right here. Why is there a little margin on the there was margin on the body. All right, we're closer. So it's not 230. Let's try 235. It's not 235. I mean, should it be 250? Yeah, it's 250. All right, we're getting there, everybody. This is my first CSS battle in a long time. Okay, but we figured out that one. Great. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. So now we're going to make that one the right color instead of red. Well, first of all, I'm going to create another one of these. And actually, we don't need position fixed on that anymore. We shouldn't need Z index either because it's just on top of it. But basically, I want to do this same thing. But with the inner one. So I can reuse the parent styles, but then we create an inner container that we're going to make smaller. And this one, the overlay is now that. This one is going to be much smaller. And we go from there. Okay, so now we need to position that one to be the right size. Let's try for 150. Yeah, we got it. All right, we're almost there, everybody. It took us a second, but we're almost there. Because now I can make this that color. And then now I just need a circle in the center of the screen to put right there. So, what's the best way to do that? I mean, I guess I could put it... The thing is, this outer overlay container, like, I guess if I just gave those styles to the body, things would be a lot easier. Honestly, I think I was thrown off by the margin earlier. I'm gonna simplify things before I create that circle. The body gets these styles. Well, no, go back. The body gets all of these styles. That's what we're gonna do. Um, no, because if it's a flex box, then everything would still need its own container. Oh well, I am going to create another container and then put the circle inside of it. Like this. And width 50 pixels, height 50 pixels, So that just makes it a square. We'll make it red. And at this point, I can make it the actual background color. And if I give it a border radius of 100%, it should turn that square into a circle. Cool. So that's the right size, but I used the wrong color. We need this color now. There we go. I've done it. So, it's pretty convoluted. So I bet whenever we look at the solutions in the Discord, we're going to find some much more elegant solutions. I was really having a hard time with just relative positioning of things and also percentages. Like, why wouldn't 100% of this inside the body work? Let me know in chat if you have an idea. But yeah, you can see that it wants us to code golf. I don't want to code golf. I'm just going to submit this. There we go. I got 100% match, a score of 600. Your score goes up if you use less characters and less code. So that's that. All right, it took me 20 minutes. I'm not happy with that, but you know, it is what it is. All right. 100% of what? The body. Like basically, what I had was if you look at this thing, where is it? There's a linear gradient on the background. Huh. If I just use ID, oh yeah. So instantly, if I change the name of all of these, so like BG container becomes A, outer overlay container becomes B, overlay container becomes C, and then inner container becomes D. Yeah, so basically I'm manually minifying the code, right? I'm just making the CSS class names as small as possible. And then circle becomes E. So yeah, this is going to score higher because it used less characters. 600.09. I think it's like a slight increase. All right, let me see what people were yelling at me while I was working on this. What's up, Lapis? Welcome in. Change from yeah, I guess if I made the body a flexbox, but then everything would still need to be positioned on top, so it's like I needed that container to center everything. Yeah. Yeah, it was margin that I didn't realize until towards the end. And what's up, Paolo? Welcome in. Come in. Is that an empty message? Oh, I see. It's her EL here. I mean, it was a EL. I figured it out. 400 pixel minus... Oh, I needed to do the divide by 2. You're right, Takas. That's why I was thrown off by the margin. So let it be a lesson to you. If you're trying this, get rid of the margins first. Yeah. So the margins got us going. Yeah, honestly, we should be able to use percentages. I have no idea why that didn't work. Yeah, and good point, America 2050. You want some kind of basic reset. Otherwise, things are not going to behave as intended. Did I misspell transform? Oh, transform origin. I see. That's funny. I technically didn't need it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well, Mark, is like, for what, like maybe Firefox is doing something different? Yeah. A Tailwind CSS battle with Spellkit? Maybe? I don't want things to require too much setup, but yeah. Oh, you're totally right, Ricky. So yeah, somebody else might have done that as well. You could think of this inner one as a single square with a background color and a border instead of two squares on top of each other. And then, honestly, I guess I didn't even think about it. The circle could actually just be inside. This will shorten my code. The circle can be inside this square like this, and then we just make this square a flex box. Like that. That solves it too. Cool. Yeah. What's up, B-Mine? Welcome in. I got rid of transform origin and it still works. I think the margin on the body is what was messing me up earlier. Yeah. Welcome in, Rain. Sledge dog. Nice. Can I make the square rotate? Like an animation, you mean? Do it with only SVGs? That's possible. Yeah. Rotate, scale, and translate are their own properties now? Is that supported? Yeah. What's up, ARP? This is not really the place for that. I mean, we have a Discord if you have a question, but we're doing other things. What do you think about having only one center box with a fat border? I think that's reasonable. Yeah, somebody else mentioned that. I think that's reasonable. How good would it be to do a fake CSS battle website where you submit your wireframe design and then get people to code it up for imaginary points on the internet? Wait, what do you mean? Are you trying to get people to do work for free? Like you call it a CSS battle, but you're actually getting paid for the work? Oh. I mean, the diff isn't completely black. If you can see it, I can see it on my screen. It does say I have 100% match, though. With a linear gradient, I don't need a class. Are you? Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're not creating this first container. You're just giving the background that specific color with like a hard stop. I get it. That's nice. What's up, Steven? Welcome in. I'm curious now, though. So CSS rotate is a new property. Let's rotate on transform. Let's look up on can I use. Cool. Cool. And it is supported in Firefox. I mean, apparently this has existed for a long time, though. So, like, for 3 years, I didn't know that there was an individual rotate property. I've always used CS or transform. Can you add transitions on rotate? Well, you could create like a keyframe animation and put rotates inside of it. Do we want to do that? I don't want to do that. I want to keep moving. But if you watch this and I don't know what I want to say, you should give this a try. If you didn't give this a try yourself, give it a try. And also, you can see I'm a professional developer. I get paid to write code, and it took me 20 minutes to do this. Also, this isn't. I've never really had to code anything like this with CSS in the real world. I mean, this is purely for practice and like learning about CSS properties and stuff like that. So I do recommend if you haven't tried it, give it a try. Don't look at my solution, but give it a try. Let's look at some other people's solutions to see what they came up with. So this is from Hushu. And let's see what they did. So they have a div, a div, a div, a div, and they're all, so they're nested. So it's B, G, S, and C are all nested. Let's just plug this code in and then we can kind of like inspect it. Fascinating. So we're working with like clip path here. I guess the other aspect is like because I made the screen a certain size, the thing was getting cut off. Um, I guess that's right. That's true, huh, Oscar? Um, it is CSS. Okay, so B is our parent container. It has that background color. Look, they used width 100%. They used width 100%. Like, I don't know what I did different. Maybe it was the margin thing. I don't know. Not on body. I tried that. If you rewind. I was so I had a fixed pixel size on the body, and then I tried to do 100% on the child. Didn't work. Doesn't matter. Okay, so um, this is that background light blue there. It's that thing. Did I still have grid on the parent? Oh well. Okay, so that's that rectangle in the background. It is actually the parent, and then this is a child. G is a child of B, and this is going to be that inner square with that background color. They figured out the right width percentage, and then what is this clip path doing though? Oh, I see. So they didn't rotate it. They actually just created a gigantic square and then had a clip path to make it into like an inner square. Fascinating. And then inside of that, they had a bigger square with another clip path. And then inside of that, clip path. I didn't know you could do a circle with a clip path. I've never used clip path before. That's fascinating. Cool. Yeah. Good job, Hushu. Using clip path was definitely new to me. Yeah, and then that's the minified version. All right, iRawesome did it as well. Let's see. By the time I thought of transform, I was almost done. Yeah, I mean, I think they're both valid solutions. All right, so they have iRawesome has a div and then a div. Inside that div, this also has the same parent. It looks like O is the one parent container. Everything else is inside of that. So, O is the full thing. It's the full thing. And then the B is the light blue rectangle. And it is centered inside of the parent. Okay. And then D is the larger rectangle, rotated, but they used a margin left to get it in the right location inside of the flexbox. Because like without that, the flexbox would have just put them side by side, I'm guessing, and this moves it to the left. So that's clever. Yeah, because by default, the flexbox would just put all the items side by side. But this pushes them to the left so that they're on top of each other. Yeah. You could lower the character count using div instead of IDs. Oh. Like, oh. Well, these are child divs, though. So this is like first child, second child, third child, fourth child, and then like parent. But yeah, cool. I like the idea of combining margin left with flexbox. That's cool. All right, let's see how Jasper did it. Oh, it's not pushed. It's pushed down. It's too far up, I think, or too far down. Maybe he didn't paste all of their code. All right, we're gonna see it how oh, I see. Mr. American Mike didn't submit a solution. They just submitted how to make that solution shorter. All right, let's see how Mark Boots did it. They just got it in. Wow. Wait, is this all the code? Is this all the code? Oh, yeah. So you have a single. Is it a single div and then a single style tag? Whoa. Okay. Well, the thing is, if you don't close radial, it still works, and then that's one character less. That's why they left that parenthesis off. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Mark Boots, but that's crazy. Okay, so star targets everything and sets the background color to the main background color. And then a margin of 750 and a height of 150. I guess it didn't matter as much. You just needed this to but what is the box shadow doing? Oh. Oh. Okay. So basically you've created the background thing with a single element that has the colors on top and bottom. Because without that, it's just a blue thing, but with it, it's that. And then I guess box shadow uses the color that you specified here. That's why I thought this was the background. Yeah. So the star is basically makes it the mini characters shorter because we're not targeting elements. We don't have any elements in the editor here either. So this is the HTML tag and everything else, and then this is a descendant of which would be like the body. So margin of 125, I guess, centers the center area. What does the box shadow do? Oh, I see. Yeah. And so, this is crazy, Mark. This is crazy. So, because the color on everything is this light blue color, when you set the box shadow on the nested element, that uses that same color, so you didn't have to specify it again. And then the radial gradient background is what just gives us the circle in the center. Yeah, it is interesting though, right, Mike? It looks a little bit grainy. I think maybe this might just be Firefox how it renders this. Fascinating, Mark. All right, that was insane. I've not seen CSS like that. All right, and then Fat Child did it as well. Let's look at their solution. 99.8%. It was like not matching exactly. Let's see. Oh, I see. So there's like a white out or a turquoise outline on the outer circle or the outer square. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're gonna keep moving. That was fun. Thank you all to everyone that participated. And I hope you participate in next week's challenge as well. So if you're interested, join the Discord, take a look at the weekly challenge channel. This is the challenge for this upcoming week. We'll review the solutions next week, but we have 3 different code katas for you to try out of varying difficulty. If you're more of a beginner program, feel free to just do the first one. You don't have to do all of them. I think if you're a beginner program, these last 2 are going to be much harder for you. So yeah. All right. Next up, let's get into the weekly discussion of what is production. So yeah, I mean, this was me trying to solve that CSS battle, basically. But let's get into this. What does it mean to be in production? Actually, I'm just gonna like take notes and write about this, and we can have the conversation in chat as well. Because I have some thoughts. Because I honestly like I hear this a lot from newer programmers as well. Like how do I know when my code is production ready, or like what's the difference between the code I'm writing now when I'm learning or in school versus the code that's in production? Um, and there's a lot of nuance and gray area here because it's not just one specific thing. It varies by situation. It varies by the thing that you're building. But let's talk about it. So first of all, let's actually just define production. What is prod? Yeah, Node ENV in production. I mean, so one thing we can also talk about is like environments. We can start there. Environments, right? So let's actually define an environment before we even get into production. An environment is a specific place that code or an app is run. That's one specific environment. And I'll say like an environment might have specific configuration for said environment. For instance, if we have a development environment, its configuration is going to say, well, the code should connect to a development database running in Docker. If we have a production environment, its configuration might say, well, we're going to connect to a production database hosted on Amazon RDS, something like that. That's what I mean by an. Oh, there's like a really loud noise. My sprinkler started making a really loud sound. I'm gonna go fix it. In the meantime, in the chat, discuss what is an environment and what is production. But I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. The music is a specific playlist. I can get it to you. Should be here. Um, welcome in, Kanye. Good to see you. Okay. Um, where were we? We were talking about what is production, and in order to define production, I wanted to first talk about environments and different kinds of environments. So, an environment is a specific place that code is running. A code or an app is running. Let's just say code is running. And each environment might have specific configuration for said environment, and there are a lot of different types of environments that you might come across. The most common would be development, your development environment. So when you're running the code and writing the code on your computer, we call that environment development. It's typically not accessible to the world. It's kind of only accessible on your local network and on locally where you're building the thing. And this is where you're testing it, you're working on it, and it's running like locally. You might just call this like local. In the world of production software, there's also things like staging, a staging environment. And basically the idea is this is a replica of the production environment in that all of the things are set up in a similar way as they would be in production, but you can test things out here to make sure that they're going to work before you put them into production. There also might be a test environment, and so this is an environment specifically set up to be able to run tests against your code in a consistent way. And then, like we said, we also have like production. In the chat, let me know what are some other environments that we might have or that we might come across. Because in defining what is production, it's not just an environment, because there's also the concept of in production, which we'll talk about as well. But I think this will help you have the right mindset for talking about production. So yeah, any other thoughts or ideas or other things we can mention for other types of environments that we might come across? And I'm gonna go grab some water. I'll be right back. Yeah, you might have like a production clone. I mean, we typically call that staging, because like staging can have a copy of the production database, and I would say like the reason. So CMS platforms use a CM server for content management. Then that gets pushed to CD. Well, what is CD? Yeah, UAT is user acceptance testing. That might not be in here. So user acceptance testing. So you might have like, I mean, maybe we also have like an automated testing environment. And so if you've seen us working on listed, we have an automated testing environment where we can spin it up. It spins up all the databases. It spins up everything it needs to be able to run the integration tests locally in that test environment. But you might also have user acceptance testing, which is a concept where you actually deploy it to where it can be used, but only specific test users have access to it, and they can. This is almost like QA or quality assurance, where you have people manually go in and testing the thing, but not in production. Yeah, I could imagine like a playground, or like experimental. Experimental. Yeah. Content delivery is CD. So you have your content management server, and then it gets pushed to content delivery. I don't have any experience with that, but I could see it. All right. All of this to say is that when your code is running in one of these places, it might have to do things slightly different. It might be for different people. But this is in the world of writing software and coding. This is what we deal with. And And the reason we have different, the reason we don't just have one environment is because the needs of users in each of these environments is very different, right? So like if you're working on a really big app that has thousands and thousands of users, you typically don't want to be testing in production, right? You want to make sure that your stuff is working and has been tested by your QA team or whatever else before you push it into production. So this kind of gives you a way of testing out new features, making sure that the new features you're about to push out don't break things before promoting that code into production, because then your large user base of thousands of users, etc., can now use those things in production that you've already tested before. That's one example of it. And then like the other thing is like in these playground or test or experimental environments, you might have a specific kind of data in your database to just see like what happens when we're dealing with that certain kind of data in one of these given environments, because what we might be testing for will eventually, when it makes it to production, we want to make sure that we can handle that chat scenario or that data scenario. Are environments similar to deployments? You could think of it like that. Yeah. So each environment would need to have code deployed to it. Specifically if we're talking about like a full stack web app or like a backend API or a front end, like you might have your test deployment. So that is your staging or potentially like your quality assurance server that it gets deployed to. You might also have your production deployment. You might also have a development deployment. So I've worked on teams before where the front end team didn't actually run. So things were split up between like backend API and front end. And typically what the front end team would do is like they would not spin up the backend code on their local computer. All of the testing that they would be doing locally, they would be connecting to a remote development server. So in that scenario, the backend team actually deployed their API to an environment called development, and everyone knew that everyone else was actually working with that API locally when they're working with their code locally. Now, I actually don't recommend this because you could run into a lot of scenarios where developers are conflicting with each other when they're trying to all hit the same development API. Yeah, and we haven't gotten into that, but like what Limeoats is saying is absolutely something you'll see. So you could also have multiple production servers for load balancing, deployment slots for zero downtime deployments, etc. Yeah, so initially, we're just talking about, all right, there are different kinds of environments. Each environment might be architected in a different way. And one of the ways that you architect for production so that it's resilient and that whenever we're deploying a new version of production, we don't want all of our existing users to not be able to use the app and the thing to be totally down. So that's this idea of zero downtime deployments where like users will be hitting one production server that's like the old version or doesn't have the new features, and then you release the new features, which is actually a separate server, and then you redirect traffic there after it's finally up and available. And then the idea of load balancing is you actually have multiple production servers and a load balancer that balances requests between those production servers. But the overall environment itself would still be described as production. Okay, so these are environments. It's a specific place that code is running. And so when we get into like, what does it mean to be in production? The first thing is that we have actual users using the application. To me, that's the simplest definition of production. So it's we're going to dive into also what it means to be tested, to be like resilient to crashes, and also to be able to handle large amounts of requests and users. But that's another aspect of production. I think to me the minimal definition of production is that actual users are using the application. So let me know in the chat. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with this definition of production? Also, let me know what else you have to say about like what your definition of production is. Because this next point, what makes code production ready, to me, that's when we're going to get into, oh, well, does it scale? Is it tested? is there zero downtime, that kind of thing. But for now, just to be in production, I would say that we have actual users. Yeah, and so that I think what Jason is saying in terms of being I don't know if this is related to the conversation earlier, but it actually applies here. So for something to be production ready, you might also say that it works cross browser and cross platform. I'll say like has been tested cross browser and cross platform. So like you might say, all right, well, actual users are using it, but if it only works in Google Chrome and it doesn't work in Firefox or Safari, you might not say that's production ready. You might say, oh, well, we need to make sure that it can work, and we've accounted for all the differences between the browsers, and we've accounted for the differences between desktop and mobile, and it actually works. Like, to me, that means we are production ready. Like there's more things you can add on here to say we are production ready, but it also depends on the app that you're building, because what if you're doing something specifically that only works in Chrome, like it's not available, like you're using browser APIs that aren't available in Firefox or Safari? Well, you can say, yeah, my app is production ready because it only supports Chrome. Like my users have to be using Chrome. They don't have to be using other browsers. So like each one of these things that we'll list out here under production ready, I think is like a spectrum of, and it varies depending on the app that you're building and what you're trying to target. Timon is saying production is where mistakes actually mean something. Yeah, I think you could say this. So like in production, a mistake could cost the business real money, right? We could lose users. There could be downtime where users aren't using the app or doing whatever it is they do in the app that makes our business money. And if you haven't accounted for that and something happens, now your business is losing money. And I would say your code or your app wasn't production ready if that actually is the case. Yeah. Yeah, and so to say that it's production ready, I would say that it is tested. We could also say like there is automation testing. There's also like manual testing. Yeah. Chrome is all you need. Yeah. I mean, not quite. I like to use Firefox. I think the best definition of production is where console log doesn't exist. Well, this is another thing is like like how do I word this? Like there is attention to code quality. And yeah, attention to code quality. We'll also say on the idea of like console log doesn't exist is only required code is shipped, right? So you shouldn't have console logs in your production code, and you should have some sort of build or development process that like removes those things before they so that they don't show up in production. But I would actually say that you don't necessarily need all of these things to say that it is in production, because as long as users are using it, it's in production. Now, every business and every team is going to have a different definition of production ready, and depending on like the size of your user base or the impact of the application that you're working on, that could actually change how much of this you're doing. Like maybe you are only doing manual testing right now, but eventually your team grows and you have the bandwidth to also do automation testing, and you know that it's going to save you time in manual testing, so you implement that. That makes it more production ready. Yeah, so optimized and minified, I think, falls under this, like, only require code to ship. So we'll say, like, optimized, minified, logs, like, are removed in user-facing code. You still want logs, like, in your backend APIs and stuff like that to be able to debug issues. But in things that make it to the user, you shouldn't be showing those things to them. Production is where we fix bugs in the real world. Yeah, I mean, you could also say production is where some bugs are found because those bugs might not be found until real users are actually using the application. Yeah. Ryan is saying production is also the only time you'll actually have real end users using the app, which means the feedback you start getting is very different and also very important. Yeah, so we have actual users using the application. I'll put that here. It's like feedback we get from users is valuable in terms of like what new features do they want to see, what bugs did they come across, that kind of thing. Yeah. Signed off by the client. I think that's the other thing is like it depends on what kind of software you're building and like who your client is. But we'll put it in quotes because your client could just be your end users, but your client could also be the people you're building the software for. Yeah, the client has signed off on what has been built. Now, the client usually is non-technical and they're not going to care or even know like what automation testing is or if it has automation testing or if the code has been minified or optimized. They really just care about features. That said, though, like there's another idea of like the app is as fast as possible. Now, fast as possible means a lot of different things. Like we could say that the app is loads and is ready to use as fast as possible, and that kind of ties into like, well, is the code optimized, minified? The end users, if we're talking about like a web application, are the end users only having to download like a small enough bundle that they don't have to download a bunch of extra stuff? The other thing is like, yeah, this gets into potential like deployments and like talking about the edge, and to say like, is it fast as possible? Well, are your servers as close as possible to the users that are using it? And that could also be defined as production. But I think the one thing I want to hit home with is like all of this is technically optional. You don't like, there is no like hard set definition of production ready being all of these things. It's like every project has its priorities and we'll pick and choose from these things in order to determine like are things production ready. Like but besides that, I think any app that is in production would all have to agree that yeah, if users are using it, it's in production. If we're getting feedback about it from end users, it's in production. If the client signed off on it and it's and it's on what we built, it's in production. Yeah, and so that's exactly what I mentioned. Like what Ryan is saying here is like you should still have logs. Like server side logs are good for debugging and figuring out issues, and also just like knowing what's happening when end users are using your app. But in user facing code, you don't want that stuff to show up. Yeah. Yeah, and so in production, you might have tools like, I mean, let's also like add this like tools and services for telemetry are included. So you might use an error logging service that will keep track of those things. You might use like a user analytics service that knows like who's using what. And you wouldn't want that same analytics like in your development build or your testing build. You typically only want that like in production. My supervisor isn't nitpicking anymore. Yeah. Yeah, security is another thing we should put on here. So like it is secure. If something is production ready, it's secure. Backend is locked down in an appropriate way. End users can't see or do things they are not allowed to. Yeah, absolutely. Technically, you would have a group of end users testing in UAT. I agree with that, but also they would know that they're in a test environment, right? I think that's UAT would be slightly different than like A/B testing, which are end users that don't necessarily even know that they're being tested on. Does that make sense? Is that where you're kind of going with that? But in my experience, like the user acceptance testing are people that know they're in a test environment and know that the things they do aren't going to get copied over to production or aren't going to affect production. Talking about optimizing and minified code and fast as possible, that's not directly production. I would argue that you would do that to make your code production ready. That's basically what we're saying here is you do that. Doing that results in like production ready code, but you don't have to do that. And if you didn't do that, that code could still be in production. Yeah. Okay. We'll answer this one next. But yeah, any other thoughts, comments, questions about what does it mean to be in production, and also what makes code production ready? I think we could probably start ideating around some other things to add around what makes code production ready. Yeah. It's a controlled group for UAT, just a point against saying that if you have users, you're in production. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess that's why I say actual users. like they're not in on it. They're not part of the client team or anything like that. They are potentially paying users of the application, trying to get some value out of it. Yeah, actual. That would almost likely result in unwanted side effects or bugs. You might do it in staging, but not to go into production readiness. I completely disagree, Timon. You can have a Vite dev server serving an app to your actual end users. Now, you wouldn't do that. Like, there's an easy way to build the app and then serve the built app, but it's completely possible to have like to just. And the reason I mention this is because I've seen this before. There were people and teams that didn't understand Webpack dev server was for development. They would actually deploy a Webpack dev server to like an Apache server or an Nginx server, and they would be serving their development server, like their client code would be served over a development server. And it worked. Like, I mean, you can't tell me that it wasn't in production because like they literally had end users that were using the app. I would argue that it made their app slower because it had to load like all of the source map files and all of the logs and everything else. I would also argue that it was less secure because they were pushing or like releasing their unminified code and stuff like that. So like that's why I'm saying like technically it could still be in production, but ultimately you wouldn't want it to be. You want to make sure that you're using like a production build, not a dev server, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, so let me just think about this a little bit. Honestly, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to see if it came up with anything else. But to say your code is production ready, like yeah, is it secure? Make sure like you've done everything you can to make sure it can't be hacked. You make sure that it works on multiple platforms and for multiple types of users. We know the stakes here, so we know that this code is being used by real end users, and if something bad happens, it could cost the business money. We're saying that it has been tested in some way. We're saying that the shipped code is built and optimized. It has telemetry and also like usage things like Google Analytics or things like that. It's as fast as possible, so we might say that it is deployed to Edge CDN as close as possible to end users. Is minified and optimized. The front end code that is downloaded by the user is as small as possible, or as few or as little as possible. Yeah, then there's also an attention to uh, code quality. What were we talking about earlier when this came up in terms of attention to code quality? Um, I think ultimately it was just that we didn't want console logs ending up in the resulting code. Um, but I might actually say here, like, there is a process around getting new code and features into production, right? So like we have code reviews, we have coding standards, these kinds of things. Like basically the team has process around making sure that we're all writing the best possible code, and we're all making sure that the best possible code actually ends up making it into production. So yeah, code reviews, coding standards, things like I think like continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment are along those lines, because you have process around getting new features into production. Are these coming from ChatGPT? Right? Because I was about to do a look for it. Disaster recovery. Develop a disaster recovery plan in case of server failures or other catastrophic events. Yeah. I mean, that typically has to do with the deployment strategy or like the DevOps of it all. It's not necessarily like the code we write. It's more around configuration and management of servers. But yeah, I would say the team has a disaster recovery plan. Performance metrics. Define key performance indicators instead of monitoring tools to track them. Yeah, so this would fall under like telemetry. I think I'll put that here, but things like Google Analytics or similar to track user behavior. Yeah, compliance is another one as well. This is a lot of things. But yeah, GDPR is the one from the European Union. But there's also the Child Protection Act, which is based out came out of California, but like regardless of where you're at in the United States, you typically follow that. There's also HIPAA, which is data privacy for healthcare. Let me see if I can find the like California User Protection Act, CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act. There's also one specifically for children. What is it called? It was referenced in the TV show Silicon Valley because they weren't keeping track of their users who ended up being like really young. Oh, is that COPA? No, it's not. Someone in the chat will have it as I scroll up. But all of this has to do with how you're storing data and what you do with that data for your end users. And typically, if you're going to be in production and say things are production ready and you're going to be making money from this thing, you typically also have to deal with compliance. The thing is, though, and what I keep going back to is, you don't have to do that. Like you could not do that. Your code could still be in production. You could still have end users, but eventually you might get sued or you might get in big trouble for not being compliant. So that's why I would say to have these things is production ready, but you don't necessarily need them to be in production. Data backup and recovery. Yeah. So we have disaster recovery, which is like if the servers go down and stuff like that. But what about like data recovery? In any production database is going to have daily backups that backs up the entire database. So if something ever goes wrong, we can always roll back at a minimum at a like max of 24 hours. Sometimes apps will have a more regular backup schedule where it's every hour or every few hours. So if something goes wrong, we can just roll back and we lost maybe a few hours of data, but we didn't lose everything. Yeah. Let's actually put that under code quality. Documentation. So code is documented. Processes are documented. Yeah. Provide comprehensive documentation for developers and operations teams. Includes setup instructions, API documentation, and any necessary configuration details. Yeah, so it's not just documenting the code, also documenting, well, how is it deployed, documenting the disaster recovery plan and stuff like that. Yeah. Compatibility. Yeah, so we have compatibility with talking about like cross-browser and cross-platform. How do you spell compatibility? Like that. In my opinion, production-ready code is something that meets the requirements that has been decided upon the client and your team. Nothing more and nothing less. Well, I would argue that's different than being in production versus production ready, because that's basically what we have here under production. Like, the client doesn't care about, I mean, they probably do care about disaster recovery and backup plans and stuff like that, but that's not typically what they're going to be thinking about. They're going to be thinking about features and end users and like making money. We will, as the, let's say we're working at a consultancy or something like that, we would tell them, well, hey, we're going to need to have all of these things if you want to be compliant and if you want to make sure that we're resilient. But they might say, well, it's not in the budget. So yeah, we're actually not going to have data backup plans because we don't have the money to do it. But it's still in production. It's still in production. Yeah. Yeah, credentials are. I like this a lot because I've seen it in production as well. Credentials and secrets are managed in some way, because the other aspect of this, and like this actually comes down, I think this comes down to security. Let's put this under security. So only the people who need them have access. Things are not hard-coded in the app. There are, yeah, so controls around access. Like, one of the things is, like, so if you look at listed and how we're deploying that with, we're not deploying that, where we have like GitHub actions that need access to secrets and stuff like that. All of those secrets are stored in GitHub secrets and they're encrypted. So once I add them in, no other developer can come in and see the value. Like they can access it via variable name in their code, but they can't go in and get that direct database URL. And that's a security precaution, because if anyone could go in, any developer on the team could go in and get the actual production database username, password, host, they could potentially do bad things. And also, it may not even be them. If their computer gets compromised and they had access to those things, then the hacker that compromised their computer could do things to the production database. But if you have controls around it and you're using tools like GitHub Secrets, or you're using other tools for managing secrets, then it makes it so that only the things that need access to it can get access to it. You don't have any unnecessary access. Because I think it ultimately comes down to, like, you may trust all the people on your team, but that doesn't mean that their computers aren't going to get hacked, or that doesn't mean that there are people in the lives of the people on your team that have access to their computer that could want to do something malicious with it. So yeah. HIPAA is data protection in Canada. So yeah, you have European data privacy, Canadian data privacy, California data privacy. Now, there might be other states that have data privacy laws, but in my experience, everyone looks at the California laws because they're most comprehensive and strict, really. So even though they're specific to California, pretty much everybody follows them, and it's like if you're following those, you're going to be able to follow most of the others. And this is healthcare, privacy. And as far as I know, it's a USA thing, but there's probably things elsewhere as well. So Colorado and Virginia have something too. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a good. Thank you, Brian. We didn't even mention this, but this is under production ready as well. I would say it is accessible. So people of all backgrounds and experiences can use the app effectively. We do have data backup and disaster recovery, but we don't necessarily have scaled or load balanced. And that would be like redundancy. It's Kappa. Thank you, Ryan. And this is another one that I'm pretty sure it came out of California, but everyone follows it. Scalability. Ensure code can scale. Well, we just added it. So like redundancy and scalability. Scalability. At a point, we had a client suffering a crypto attack. The only file that didn't get encrypted was the live database because it was up. I mean, that's the other thing about like, so I was talking a second ago about like making sure that only the right people have access to the things. Like, if one machine gets compromised because of like a crypto encryption scam or something like that, you don't want your entire business to go down because of that. So you have processes in place to prevent something like that from happening. For one, you have data backups. So if a machine does get compromised, you can just wipe it and reload it. You don't have to pay the ransom fee. Also, yeah, you have like controls around who has access to what. So like if one machine gets compromised, then it doesn't take the whole business down. Yeah, legal agreements. Yep. Cost optimization, content moderation. When you make money with your product in Germany, the DSGVO. Yeah, we have PIPA. Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act in Canada. Yeah. SMC is saying, I worked for a large hospital and we did a lot of stress testing. Yeah, I don't think we even mentioned that, but that's another thing to talk about. So we talked about like it's tested, but we also talked about, is it scalable? Where did I put that? Yeah, redundancy and scalability. Yeah, it can scale, and like tests for scaling with stress and load tests. Yeah. Spark is saying, yeah, we weren't allowed to store data on our systems. Everything is supposed to be stored on the server. So if your laptop catches fire, you're golden with a new one. Yeah. So there's probably a lot more we could even add here, but honestly, this is one of the things that makes writing software in production and in the real world makes it so much harder than just like the simple apps you might build for your portfolio or something like that. When you try to build a business around software, there are so many other things you need to think about that aren't just code. Um, there's a lot more, which is why typically a company will have uh, a lawyer on staff, or like a lawyer on like that they have easy access to help them with like legal issues and compliance and stuff like that. And you might also have like a dedicated DevOps team and data team to handle the backup and recovery, and also like architects that can handle making sure that it scales. So that's why for uh, apps out there that have a lot of users, like it's more than just the code. It really is. Okay, now to this last point here, which says, and this comes from Stefan. If you're learning something new, how do you know when you're ready to work in production with the thing you've been learning? And yeah, thank you, Milan. That's another one we should add to this list is licensing and credit. So like open source software licenses, licenses for proprietary software. Yeah, these are all things you have to worry about. So there are certain types of open source licenses that say you can only do certain things with your code if you're using that open source library in a specific way. And if you're trying to build a business and make money, you might have to watch out for that. Also, there are a lot of open source licenses that basically just say you have to give credit. You have to say where you got this code from and that the fact that you're using it. So you need to make sure to do that, or you might get in legal trouble. Also, you might be using proprietary software, and you might need license keys for like every instance of the app or something like that. So that's something you'd have to worry about. Yeah, and like SMC or SMC MAI is saying government regulations. Yeah, I think this is potentially under compliance, but we'll put it out under. We'll add that too because it's not just compliance. Okay, all of that said. If you're learning something new, how do you know when you're ready to work in production with the thing you've been learning? Now, this is where there's gray area, right? Because I would argue that like if you're like working at a startup, or you're just like you have an app that you're just starting a business with, you don't necessarily need all of these things. You need some of these things, but you don't need all of them. So, I think where this question comes from is really just a matter of like, oh, well, if I just learned the thing and like there's a lot that I don't know about it yet, am I still able to use it in production? And I would argue yes. I would argue like you don't have to be an expert in a specific library that you're using for your end users to get value out of it, right? I think like if you've followed their docs, if you've done the basic implementation and it works as expected, good to go. Now, the other thing to think about, which I guess we didn't talk about here, but there actually should be a point to talk about dependencies and libraries are audited. That is, you make sure that the dependencies and libraries you're using don't have security vulnerabilities, that they are regularly maintained. The contributors are active. I guess that's the same thing. But this is one thing that I would worry about if I've just learned a new library and I want to know if I can use it in production. Because if this is not the case, then I would look for something similar or not use the one that potentially has security vulnerabilities. So let's say you want to use some library on npm. Let's look at best of JS just to find like a more recent thing. Like yeah, let's say you want to use Bun. Actually, Bun isn't on npm. Let's look at Hono. there's a lot of things to consider when deciding, should I use this library, and also should I use this library in production. So first of all, you can look at the GitHub repo. You can see the activity in terms of issues and pull requests. So let's look at like how to audit. Look at GitHub issues and PRs. Are there a lot of issues open? Are there a lot of pull requests open that haven't been merged? Those are both things to consider. I would say GitHub stars indicate interest and popularity, not usage. So you would you would look to see, all right, Hono has 6.7 thousand stars. That's a lot of stars. That means a lot of people are interested in it. That doesn't necessarily mean that many people are using it. Yeah, I'm going to push this up to GitHub so you can look at it when I'm done. But what we would do is we would look at this library on NPM, and that would give us kind of an idea of usage. It's still not perfect, but it is something else that we can look at, because if we look at specifically on GitHub, we can look at those things. And then on NPM, we can see how many weekly downloads. So this is a closer indication of how many people are actually using this, but you still can't trust that number entirely, because there are a lot of automated systems that do installs, and also like developers that do installs. But thank you, CM Griffin. Thank you for the tier 1. Feel free to ignore, but you can probably just stream on both platforms. Yeah, so I mean, I have a moment. I'll just talk about it. The issue is all of those views get lost. Because if I cross stream, everybody just watches on Twitch, and then that's like typically like at least 1,500 views that I don't get on the YouTube video, if that makes sense. Which is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. Does that make sense? Like, so, I guess I could show in my Twitch analytics. Like, you might see that for any given live stream, there are only like, not only, there are, let's say 200 average viewers, but over the lifetime of the stream, there are quite a few more unique viewers, and that those numbers get applied to my YouTube videos. So if you look at today's stream over on Twitch, there have been 600 unique viewers on Twitch alone. And so if I was cross streaming, that number would only be on Twitch. It wouldn't necessarily be applied to the number of views on the YouTube video. We can also look at my like previous stream. Like the last stream, I mean, these were both like cross streams. Yeah, this is one that I didn't stream on YouTube, but this one stream had 1,800 unique views. That view, if I were to have cross streamed to YouTube, that viewer count wouldn't cross over. There would probably be like 20% of the audience that was watching on YouTube instead. So that's the main reason I'm not cross streaming, is because then my audience gets diluted and I basically lose the viewer count on the YouTube stream. That's where my head's at right now. I think there's other things to consider, but that's basically what I'm thinking about, is basically every stream I do, I lose that view count from Twitch compared to the YouTube stream. Yeah. All right. Talking about weekly downloads. This is, I'll say, take this number with a grain of salt. Automated systems get counted here. So like if there's a CI server that runs multiple builds per day for like every PR or whatever else, that's going to inflate the weekly download count. If you have Docker containers running locally for devs that do an npm install, that's going to inflate the weekly download count. So like you can't trust this. I mean, I don't even know a percentage. You could say, all right, well, maybe if we're talking about actual users, not just automated systems, this number maybe like 60% of that number is actual users. I have no idea. I don't know. I don't think you can put an exact percentage on it, but that's something to consider as well. You can also look at the number of dependents. So that is how many packages on npm have Hono listed as a dependency. Now, this number is only packages published to npm. This isn't an indicator of people that don't publish their stuff to npm. So like, for example, listed is dependent on SvelteKit. Is it this? Oh no, it's at svelte/kit. Svelte.js/kit. Now you can see this has 78 dependents, but that's people that have pushed their code to npm, which I'd be curious about. Why are they doing that? But like listed, the app that we've been working on that uses SvelteKit, isn't listed here because it's not published to npm. So the number of dependents is it varies depending on the kind of thing that you're using. Yeah. So yeah, those are all things you can look at and consider. And then also, what I didn't mention is the license. So there are types of open source license like the GPL, the GNU General Public License, GNU General Public License. This says that if you're using a library that has this license and you're linking to the source code, the code that you write has to have this same license. And this license also says that the code cannot be used commercially, I'm pretty sure. The licensee is allowed to charge a fee for the service or do this free of charge. The latter point distinguishes the GPL from software licenses that prohibit commercial redistribution. Okay, so technically it doesn't have that. It mainly just says that you have to release your code as open source as well. And where that may come into conflict is if you are trying to run a business and your IP, your intellectual property, is your code base, you don't want to have to open source that, because if you do, then potentially other people might try to start a business around the code that you wrote. So you typically, as a company writing software, you want to avoid using software that uses licenses like these so that you don't have to release your code as open source as well. Yeah, so I typically use MIT, and MIT is very permitting and basically says, I'm not liable for anything that you do with my code, but you are allowed to use my code. And you can make money off of my code. You can take my code, fork it, and then close source it and do whatever you want with it. But ultimately, I'm not liable for anything that you do with my code. It's very simple. This is the entire license. And so this is the one that I like to use. There's also the Apache license, which is similar to MIT, but it's a bit longer and a bit more, I think it goes into more detail of like how you can't hold me accountable for anything you do with this code. But we'll say this license. Make sure the open source license aligns with what you're trying to do. Because it's completely possible to run a business, have code that is open source, but really the way you make money is with like how you run your business and how you host the code and everything else, and not necessarily the code itself. So there are some scenarios where your stuff can be open source, but you can still be making money. But typically, if you're working at like a larger company or corporation, they do a lot to make sure that stuff that has a license like this doesn't make it into their code base. As an anecdote, that's actually what happened with Apple. So in the more recent Apple operating system. I guess I'm on Mavericks. I don't know if that's the latest one, or that if that's there was one where they started using Zish by default instead of Bash, and the reason is Bash changed their open source license. Like the most recent version changed the license. The older versions are still under the older license, but the more recent version of Bash, I believe, uses the GNU GPL. Let's look at see what license they're using. Yeah. Maybe it's the GPL 3.0 is less permissive than the GPL 2.0, but since version 4 they changed to GPL 3.0, and Apple didn't want that license in their code, like the code base for the Apple operating system, or they would have had to potentially open source it. Okay, let's get back to the conversation here, though. Yeah, unused dependencies are I think that would fall under making your code as small and optimized as possible, right? No unused dependencies. Yeah. Okay, but getting back to this question, if you're learning something new, how do you know when you're ready to work in production with the thing you've been learning? First of all, I would make sure that there's no security vulnerabilities, that the project itself is active. And then from there, that's ultimately what you need to look at. I mean, does anyone else have any thoughts on how you can determine if a project is something that you'd want to use? Other metrics like GitHub stars, issues, PRs, weekly downloads. What are some other things we can look at for a given package? What else did I want to mention, though? Oh, yeah. Documentation, yeah. Is the project well documented? Is the community active? I think that's another thing. Like, do they answer questions quickly? Are issues on GitHub quickly resolved? So here to sum this up quickly, here's my advice. If you learned a new thing, you learned enough to get it working in your app, and you've determined, all right, the documentation is good. If I want to figure out more things about this library I've chosen, I can do it. The community is active. They answer questions. They fix things. And the package doesn't have any security issues and is well maintained. I think it's okay to use in production. As simple as that. You don't have to be an expert in it. You don't have to necessarily do all of these other things that make your code production ready. I think it's as simple as, does it work for what you need it to do, and will it continue to work into the future? So that was my hour-long answer to that pretty quick summation of, like, should you be using it in production? I think that's all I have to say about this. Any other thoughts, comments, questions about things being production ready, or using things in production, or other things to consider when putting something in production? This is now you're ready. So this was for the week of September 4th. I'm actually going to put this in a separate one. Would I consider using Bun in production now that 1.0 is out? I'd have to test it. From their announcement, it seems like it's fast, and it seems like it's supposed to be a drop-in replacement for Node, but I'd have to try it just to make sure. I think, like, I guess the example in this case would be like listed. I would, if I wanted to use bun with listed, I'd test it locally. We'd try using bun like in the Docker containers for npm installs and everything else like that. And if all the tests pass, sure. I think at this point that's really all we could consider is like, does it still run and do the test pass? And if so, if it's faster and easier to use, yeah, why not? Actually, I'm going to do this. We have our notes, which is here, and our video, which is happening right now. If y'all need to use it with Circle CI, some individual with amazing hoodies and beanies created an orb for it. Nice, CM Griffin. Glad to hear it. Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for lurking. What was I gonna do? Oh yeah, we're gonna link to today's YouTube video. Cool. All right, I think that's all I have for you. I'm gonna get out of here, and I will see you all on Wednesday. So definitely join the Discord if you haven't yet. For one, you can participate in next week's weekly discussion, which is, are you using TypeScript in your JavaScript project, etc. So you can join the weekly discussion channel and give your input there. Also, we have a weekly challenge, which we'll talk about next week. And this is 3 coding problems that you can try solving. And on Wednesday, we are going to have a game night. So if you're in the Discord, definitely check out the community events channel where we're planning that. And so on Wednesday, we're going to just get together and play some games. It's going to be fun. So definitely join the Discord if you haven't yet and check out all that stuff. Also, I keep you all up to date in my mailing list. So join the mailing list if you'd like to get weekly notifications of the weekly challenge, the weekly discussion topic, and also you can get go live notifications as well. I don't necessarily have a complete intro to Svelte video, but if you go here, you can look at all the videos I've done on Svelte and pick and choose. I would say probably the Svelte Abstravaganza is like me building several little apps with Svelte, and that's probably a good intro to Svelte. But it's not Svelte Kit. It is just how does Svelte work. But that's definitely one to check out. What else? Follow me over here on YouTube if you haven't yet. Follow my personal channel. So I didn't do any IRL streams last week, but I might be doing some this week. And then also I've been playing a lot of Pokemon TCG, and I might do that live over here on my personal channel. So follow my personal channel. And join us for game night, and then also join us on Friday when we'll be working on a SvelteKit app. So if you check the Coding Garden schedule, you can see when I'm going to be live on Friday. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Thanks for all your comments, and it was fun to look at your solutions, and I hope to see you all on Friday and also next week as well. So wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night, and until next time, here's this.